could see it all.
there.
And me, Oliver Barsby. Introduce yourself.
I get to talk now. Hi, I'm James. I am the Boar Film editor, but Ollie knows me more for just bombarding his DMs with strong opinions about games. So he invited me on to discuss my opinions on narrative games specifically, which I'm very happy for the opportunity for. It means I get to talk about a bunch of my favorite games, and would I say no?
Of course. Who could say no to coming on the Warhog podcast? No. Yeah. Beat that. Beat that every single other podcast. uh, let's ask Reggie Fils-May. No, he's hey, he's retired. Yeah, he's retired. Get him on. Well, that'll be next week. But for now, we've got to deal with James Palmer here from the Boar Film. He's the sort of the back. He was the backup. Reggie was not there. Actually, no, we've not asked him yet, but he'll be next week. So for now, we've got James. But he knows a lot more probably about Nintendo don't have the best record with narrative games, which we'll I'm sure discuss later. But for now, we've got James, and yeah, this is us. So James, we'll start with you. What have you been up to this week? What was your? I know you'll have been watching many films and all that good film stuff which comes from the Boar Film. I'm sorry for reducing you just to films at the moment, but what games have you been playing this week? If you played any games?
You could even reduce me further from Boar Film because I've literally, because of how degree work's really stacking up at the moment, I've literally watched no films recently. The last film I watched was watching the new SpongeBob movie on Sunday, and as a fan of the old franchise, as a TV show as a child, it really kind of upset me how much it just seemed to disrespect Stephen.
Yeah, the 3D nature of those films does not look good.
I genuinely should not be this upset about a SpongeBob film being bad, but it was just so apocalyptically bad in so many places that it really upset me. It really managed to rattle me. So that's the only thing film-wise. Games-wise, for lockdown, me and my housemates have split on buying Skate 3 together. So it's a lot of just walking into the living room at random times of the day, and someone's just kind of done with work temporarily, so they're on Skate 3.
I mean, out of all the games, yeah, it's a decent one.
It's really difficult to actually get into the skating because it's actually so hard to pull off. Whereas I think Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, which when I was in self-isolation, a friend of mine who goes to university in Leeds posted that down. So I could pass the time then. That is a lot more accessible than Tony Hawk's. Well, no, than Skate 3. So apart from that, I can't really say I'm the biggest expert with skating games. I never really played that much in my childhood. So this is kind of a new experience for me. But yeah, that's kind of what.
Did you not want
It's an odd one. Go on, you.
Did you not want to get Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2, like the remake that came out recently?
I've seen it when 4's been announced, hasn't it? So Skate 4 is coming.
Yeah, there's a new one coming. Yeah.
Yeah, the collection for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, I have been tempted to get, but at the same time, I can't be bothered. I just can't be bothered to spend that much money on it. So that's kind of the short and long of that there.
Bit of Skate, it's a good game, very fun. I did like it a bit. I think I'm the same boat as you. I thought, well, when I compared to Tony Hawk, I thought it was much more accessible. Tony Hawk. I've not played the new one, but everyone was so hyped when Skate 4 got announced. I was like, cool, but it definitely impressed a lot of video game players. So all exciting times. Skate, we'll love to see it. Love to see it. Hamish, what have you been up to? What's been your game of choice this week?
So again, it's been a little bit. I've actually not gamed too much this week, but when I have had time, it's been some Destiny 2 because obviously I'm still really into Beyond Light. I don't know why. I need to find a group of 5 other people that I know that play Destiny. So far, that group of people is 0. But once I find 5, I can do the raid. So I'll give me like a month.
I
and
know
I'll build up the
nobody who plays
confidence to
Destiny.
give me like a month, and I'll have the confidence to like go on the Reddit and ask people to team up with me. This
I
person.
remember on the Xbox, there was like when I had my Xbox One, it's like a looking for group search function or some sort of function, which I actually use quite a bit. I think to play like Fortnite, which is quite cool.
I have a clan, so like I'm part of like a YouTubers like Destiny 2 clan. So I might try and see if anyone on there would do it. But talking to people online scares me a lot. Having the mic, I don't do it, so I'd need to get a headset. But it's also like Black Friday, so that might be the perfect time. But then also other gaming news, I can now finally dab on all the other 10-year-olds in Fortnite because I got to level 220 this season, so I have the cool hollow foil Wolverine. Level? It's not the top level, but it's the final level where you get something new.
Okay, yeah.
So the final version is you get a Wolverine skin that's all like hollow foil, so it's like rainbowy and really it actually looks really cool. Some of the other hollow foils don't look that interesting, but the Wolverine one is choice. And now, as I said, I can just go and crank 90s on some 10-year-olds and be like, screw you. I play this game a lot.
Hey, love to see sticking to your values, sticking to your guns there. But I think
that's all I played is Destiny 2 and Fortnite.
I can also flex this week with my PS5 again. We talked about it a bit last week, but I think because obviously we record our podcast on Thursday, so when the PS5 first arrived in my house, it just literally arrived, and I just started setting it up and downloading the games and starting playing it. So now a week in, I can finally say, the PS5 is pretty good. The controller, which I've got here, is the best thing about it. It's the best thing about it. Miles Morales, I've finished it. It's fine. It's good. It's better than good. It's very good. It's one of these games which suffers from the first game being equally good. And it's a bit short as well. Like I've already finished it, which is I've not actually put that much time in it. It's 10 hours long. There's more stuff to do, but it's quite short. Astro's Playground, best game for PS5, and it's free just because of how fun it is. But this controller, honestly, it's kind of a meme to say, oh yeah, you can't explain why it's good, but like it's one of these things where everyone knows that it's got haptic feedback and it's got these triggers which like they can like fight back against you and stuff. But until you actually hold it and you crash into a car or you crash into a building on Watch Dogs Legion, and you're like, oh, I can feel where the car actually impacted the wall on my controller.
Or you're like me, where I crash into people by accident. They just walk out in the middle of the road in front of you.
Yeah,
so you feel that when you bump somebody, they just go under your wheels.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been very fun. And I've also foolishly bought Black Ops Cold War as well. 125 gigabytes. So I'll be trying that out tomorrow. 125 gigabytes for that game. That is an inexcusable amount of
That's like
storage.
a quarter of the total space you have on the PS5, right?
Yes. I've used like a third of it already, and I'm just like crying because I'm like, I've got like 4 games installed. I've got Watch Dogs, Spider-Man, Astro's Playground, and now Call of Duty. But I'm probably going to uninstall Watch Dogs Legion. I was going to keep it for the multiplayer, but then it got delayed. Like everything has been delayed this year, so I'm like, right, cool. Well, I guess I'm going to delete this.
Well, I need to still play Watch Dogs Legion. It's still. I'm going to say it. I've said it like 15 times. I not just finish it. I need to play it. I've played like 10 minutes of it since like it came out after that first week.
Disgusting. Great game.
It's bad.
Everyone should play it.
Yeah. Well,
it's one I'm meaning to get to as well.
I've heard you should. Ollie has talked about this game frequently.
As far as open world games goes, well, as far as games set in the UK go, it's pretty good. I've been craving it. Yeah.
How many others are there? There was
there's a few out there. There's like if you count Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Old school GTA.
Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
I was going to call it Victory, but it was a Syndicate.
Syndicate, yeah. There's
and Forza Horizon 4, I think.
Yeah, there's a few out there, but this is a very if you know London, you'll be well at home.
Pokemon Sword and Shield.
The less said about that game, the better.
Yeah, I mean, I still need to play the DLC on that game. I will eventually, probably over the Christmas break. There's a few
I
games I
will
need to
not
get
be
to.
playing that.
No, I mean, I've paid for it. I might as well at this point.
Yeah,
Money's been spent. So Ollie, before we get you drowned in the sadness of thinking about Sword and Shield, why don't we get into the news? So why don't you kick us off with our first news story?
yeah. Well, I've been talking about how the PS5 is so good, and next gen's so good and so good. But now we're going to talk about why the next gen's not being so good. So
Yeah.
it's been a good few weeks since the PS5 and the Xbox Series S or X have been out, and they're still really really buggy. So the
Yeah.
PlayStation 5 has had quite a few bugs at launch. That's putting it lightly. Just to list a few off the top of my head, like the rest mode feature doesn't work. The DualSense controller is a bit messed up at connecting to the console in general. There's a really weird bug where if you try and put in a PS5 game, it might just go, "Yeah, I'm going to download the PS4 version instead." Or interestingly, my favorite one is if you want to play a PS4 game from a disc, you put in that PS4 game, it tries to install a PS. No, if you're trying to play a PS5 game from a free PS4 upgrade, if that makes sense. So if the Watch Dogs Legion, you got a PS4 version, and you're trying to use it to play the free PS5 version, you put in that PS4 disc, and every single time, no matter if you've got the PS5 version downloaded, it will try and copy over the PS4 version. So every time I put in my Watch Dogs PS4 disc, it will try and install the PS4 version, and I have to manually stop that installing and be like, "No, I don't want this. I've got the PS5 version. Stop it." So that's a few of them. The Xbox Series X and S have had some quick resume issues. There's been some other issues of the frame drops being struggling with running certain games.
Yeah.
There's been various issues with like consoles bricking, not connecting, having to reinstall, and it's quite sad to see, but not unexpected that these machines are sort of they're a bit buggy, a bit glitchy at the moment. People spend 450 quid on them. And it's a bit sad to see. It's bumming me out a bit. I'm lucky. I'm touching wood. That was me. If you heard me bang there, touching my desk made of wood. Nothing's happened to me properly yet.
Because I think
whether it's
I was writing about stuff like this earlier in the week. I might have even been last week, and it was like there was one thing where like trying to download PS5 games, it just wouldn't download your game at all, and it could potentially like wreck your console just trying to download.
It just goes into a
digital
queue
game
and then never installs. I saw
so they had to do that, and you're right. It is a real shame that these things happen. I mean, it's to be expected. New hardware of any kind is always a little bit glitchy, and particularly it's a pandemic, and I feel like because they came out, this November, probably they weren't really delayed that much. I
think the general consensus, which these interviews with Phil Spencer and Jim Ryan from PlayStation have sort of, it seemed that these consoles haven't really been delayed. They might have had like a week's delay, but
like really minor. And so you're gonna get, that maybe that last few months of trying to tweak everything, make sure the firmware and software's up to date and good, up to scratch what you'd expect. You're gonna lose some of that because everyone's working from home. There's gonna be disconnects. There were probably a few weeks of people off. They might have had to furlough people. All these big, mess of this. I can't think of what it is, like mess of factors that will lead to a slightly messy launch.
It's impressive enough that they've even released this console. I think that's the one thing which everyone's sort of been like, we'll give you a pass for this. You've managed to actually release this. It's got a few problems, a few crashes here and there.
Yeah.
Credit to you, James. As someone who you don't, I'm not making an assumption to him. I don't think you got a PS5 or an Xbox Series X, did you?
I can't be bothered at the moment to get one of them. Again, like if I'm not going to invest the money.
Is it putting you off?
If I'm not going to invest the money for like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, then I'm sure as shit not buying a PS5 or like an Xbox One X. Like,
what would it take for you to buy a PS5? What's the thing?
Okay, if someone messaged me and said, if you see your feet, I will get you a PS4 or an Xbox One X of your choice, then yeah, fine. I'll do that deal with the proverbial devil. But I think in any other scenario, for now, for the foreseeable future, no. Like there's in my mind, there's just no point. It's an interesting point that you made about whether we should necessarily be giving a pass for the fact that a console was released, right? It reminds me of the Mighty Number 9 came out, and everyone said it was
yeah.
really bad. And then the creative director said, "Hey, it's better than nothing," and everyone was just like, "I'm not sure about that one." Yeah, it's
you know,
like
you gotta try.
Yeah, I mean,
Good enough excuse.
look, the prices of these are going to go down over time, and the quality of not only the consoles themselves but also the games are going to go up over time. And I'm not sure. I feel like to buy a PS5 or Xbox One X or S at launch, then you have to be either someone with a vested interest in the games industry, such as the hosts of this wonderful podcast, or you have to have more. Or you have to have more money than sense. I think is kind of the two categories of people buying these consoles at launch, because the old ones haven't gone away. I mean, when I had a vested interest in the games industry when I was 13, yeah, I got a PS4 at launch. It was really good fun. I loved the excitement of Christmas Day, opening it up, playing all the new games, and experiencing kind of this technological leap for the first time that I can remember. And so, fair enough, to people like having that kind of moment of technologies advancing again and having that moment of wonder of seeing it progress again. It's a lovely thing, and hopefully many 13-year-olds will find as much enjoyment as I did back in the day, right? But I think, and now that I have to buy these things myself and not rely on my dad's wallet, I probably need to be a bit sensible and leave it for a bit.
Yes. Unfortunately for those 13-year-olds, I don't think many of them have got PS5s unless their parents were right on the ball when those pre-orders opened.
Yeah,
I think
a pair of 13-year-olds on the ball with these kinds of things.
There'll be a lot of disappointed children at Christmas.
This was even worse than it was with the PS4
I've already
launch,
decided.
right?
You might get a few PS4s.
Well, I think with the PS4 launch, there was kind of like this similar level of scarcity, and shout out to Matthew Palmer, right? He stayed in queue at Game for me and my brother to make sure that we got the console. So big up.
They can't do that anymore. All the stores are closed. They're all
with coronavirus as well.
It is a travesty that game is classed as non-essential. People like me, I mean, I don't buy anything in game, but I like visiting.
The game store's dying anyways, so it'll take.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it'll be going.
They'll take whatever excuse they can get. It's not to do with lacking sales. It's entirely coronavirus. We blame the UK government. But yeah, I mean, I think at this point, I'm going to try and get my hands on one of these things as soon as I can. But yeah, it's just one of those things. I don't mind. I can wait out, seeing all these articles about how they're breaking and ever. That actually fills me with a little bit of joy. It makes me feel like I made the right decision. And I've delayed my own buying of them a little bit further. I mean, I dropped like £200 on Lego last weekend because they were doing like a Lego VIP weekend. So that's probably delayed me getting a PlayStation 5 and Xbox a bit further. It's for 2 Lego sets. They're pricey things.
Lego sets.
Yeah, I got 2 really cool ones. I've got the Razor Crest, which is the ship from The Mandalorian.
Oh, okay.
And then also, this is gonna sound weird, but I kid you not, it's an 18+ Lego set. It's a Lego set of 1, 2, 3 Sesame Street, and it comes with a little Elmo, a little Big Bird. It comes with Bert and Ernie.
And that was like £100 or something.
Yeah, but they're really cool. I'm really excited for it. It also came with like a few extra goodies because it was like a deal weekend. If you buy this, you get like extra points. Okay. You can get like a cool few extra sets for free.
Nice.
To be fair, I completely back that, especially with think how Lego's evolved when they've got those like stupidly big Star Wars sets, among other things, which are really they're more like showpieces or like conversation pieces that replace like paintings or something in your house, but you get the joy of building them as well. Like I've still got my Lego tumbler in my room because I'm a fan of that trilogy.
And that's one thing I'm thinking of. Oh, you got this from like the little Lego shop, didn't in the Leamington Parade, right?
Yeah, it's one of the Leamington Parade. Shout out to the common thing. Anyone who lives in Leamington lives
Brick in it or something.
Work. Yeah, I think it's called Brick in It. Shout out to them. They do really good custom Lego figures. It's got Shadow the Hedgehog one for all you gamers out there.
That's really cool. I fucking love Shadow. Best version of the Hedgehog.
Best one. Before we move on to our next story, I've got one more question to ask about the PS5 to James.
Yeah.
I know you're a big fan of the Silent Hill franchise. You
I knew you were
talks,
going to
yeah,
ask this.
we
Yeah.
talk about it a lot. If, like the rumors suggest, at the Game Awards, a Silent Hill either remake or a completely new game is announced, would that be enough to tempt you to get a PS5 if it's exclusive to the console?
It would definitely tempt me, but I'm not sure how resigned or jaded by the fact that nothing's ever going to really beat Silent Hill 2 I am. This is something I've just kind of accepted as a truth. Even with Kojima's Silent Hills, after I played Silent Hill 2 at like the start of this year, I did just think to myself, well, like it was never really realistically, it was just never going to beat that game anyway. So, like, I think this my Hill franchise has fallen so far downhill that if it was one announced and two looked like it was going enough back at the roots with people who made the original games, Team Silent, also
So
involved
yeah,
on the project.
it was not Konami who made it, essentially.
Oh, Konami published it. Obviously, it was Silent Hill 3 where they really kind of started meddling with the franchise way too much. If there would have to be certain guarantees in place, and I'm not sure how much I would believe like them seeing this at an event versus if I was in a room with the creative directors of the game and put them under a polygraph and asked them these questions about how the game was being made and its quality assurances, then yes, I would probably start giving some funny looks to the PS5.
So it's a very specific niche situation where you would get it.
Yeah, I think like what I'm trying to emphasize here is I'm very skeptical about these new consoles. And just after you asked me, like as someone who's not bought them yet, like what I think of them, I was thinking like what games would actually make me want a PS5. If they remastered Silent Hill 2, well, they did that for the PS3 and managed to muck it up because it's Konami. Like, not sure what new games could really be made or who I trust enough to make a new game that would actually be good and something I'd want to play is the main issue. Like I don't want it
It'll
to just
be a long stretched out process in terms of when the PS4 gets just no games get released on it. Then it might be.
yeah.
Sony have really convinced me. I sent Ollie a text about this week. The next The World Ends With You game is coming out on the PS5 or PS4 and Switch. Weirdly, even though it's coming out next year, it's not coming out on PS5 officially yet. But like that's convinced me to want to get a PlayStation console because the 3D graphics and animation, the Switch will not hold up with those. Like if it had been like the 2D style from the DS, I'd consider getting it on Switch because it's like, okay, like this could probably get away with those graphics, but because it's 3D and everything, the Switch is absolutely going to be a worse version of it. And the one
it is always one of those, I don't want to say odd games, but like sometimes it's the random games which convince you. I got a PS4 because of Detroit Become Human, which many people don't really like. I thought it was a good game, but I mean, we could talk about this later. Again, it's a narrative.
We will talk
It comes back to a narrative in game.
And David Cage will be a talking point.
Cage will be talked about. That was what I got my PS4 for.
Oh,
okay. Well, should we keep cracking through the news?
Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Now we are.
Okay, because the next news story was kind of an interesting one, and maybe it's like still on this vein of Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5, but it was kind of looking at the weird side of the PS5 for me because basically I saw the news today that Star Wars Squadrons is going to be getting 120 FPS support on the Xbox Series X, but not on the PS5, and it joins the list of games like Call of Duty Warzone and Rocket League, which have also had like 120 FPS modes added only onto the Xbox Series X. And it looks like the main reason behind that is on Xbox, you just throw in a patch on the backwards compatible game, Bob's your uncle, you're done. But on the PS5, you need a whole new game, and that's why you had the whole Spider-Man PS4 remaster debacle earlier with this year. And so it's kind of just asking you guys more, like, do you think this is going to impact people preferring the Xbox Series X over the PS5 if they're a bit on the fence? If they're thinking, I want to play the games I already have at the best version, do you think they'd consider going for the Series X, or do you think it's just something that's going to maybe be something that people at like the highest levels are going to care about, but most people are just going to ignore?
Yeah, it's a really, I think it's an odd thing because my do you have 120 FPS supporting thing?
Um,
That's the
Probably not.
question.
I mean, oh yeah, because yeah, it would matter on your screen, wouldn't it? I
Yeah,
don't
because I
know.
don't. I mean, my monitor's not very good. It's only 60 FPS supporting, so I'm like, I'm like, I don't really. I'm not
Don't
that
mind this
fussed
one.
about it. But it depends. I don't know about 4K TVs. I think many don't do. But it is an odd issue because I would have thought it would have been if we hadn't gone through this and I'd read the article you sent me. I would have probably thought it'd be the other way around because Xbox sent their development kits to like developers and all these sort of studios later than PlayStation did.
Yeah, that's what I
So
think
I would
you
have
sent
thought
me a
they would
thing
have had
being
more
like that's
time.
why
Yeah,
there's more problems on some Microsoft
yeah,
games. That some of them aren't as
exactly.
enhanced.
Some of them they haven't
But
had
yeah,
as much time. Like I think Assassin's Creed Valhalla was one which has had a few issues. So it's just an odd sort of thing where some games are doing better, some games aren't doing as well. And I don't really know the explanation. I mean, I guess Xbox has this sort of thing of the games need to run on all these devices. They need to be on the Xbox Series S, Xbox Series X, Xbox One, Xbox One S, Xbox One X. You know,
yeah,
well, X Cloud if they're cloud compatible. So there's all these games which have very different specs, very different sort of these consoles
it's
with different specs and stuff. So maybe it's just a matter of they've had to optimize it so much that they're like more adapted
yeah.
to
Well, I
adapting,
think
if
it's
that
like a
makes sense.
it's a weird holdover from the reason that I think Fable Legends got cancelled. That was like that was a Fable game that's been worked on for a bit, and it's basically what killed Lionhead Studios, was because they were struggling to make it because it had to be able to work on the Xbox and on PC. It was when they wanted to basically make the Xbox game platform like all in sync, and they were just like, this is too difficult. Whereas obviously now they've managed to really simplify the process. They've made it super duper easy, and now it's so easy that it's you just do one thing and then it's a couple of patches here and there and an update or two, and you can make it really good on one console, a bit lower quality on another, and it all runs fine. So it's kind of interesting how just over a few years, I don't know when did Fable Legends get cancelled? Like
Well,
2015.
yeah, probably a bit ago, but fine. I've got
Oh,
a new one coming soon.
2016.
Got a new
So
one
like
coming soon. So it's all good.
2016, but it's interesting how in like only 4 years Xbox have managed to take this idea that seemed really awful, a single platform, and they've suddenly managed to kind of make it work, and it's easier for people now rather than it being the reason a game company loses all its money and has to close down.
Yes, that's not what we want to see. Any
Yeah.
game companies closing down in the future.
Yeah, okay, well, I think with that all answered, I just get Ollie's opinion. There's the PS5 owner here. We can go on to another one that I also want to talk about, was like what we think about leaks in gaming. And I guess, James, with your sort of love of narrative games, this can be another one for you, because this week we've seen, I feel like, two biggish leak things. A lot of people have been releasing stuff about the upcoming Fortnite event, which will involve Galactus. Anyone worried about the leaks, by the way, won't be talking about anything specifically. I mean, I, for one, haven't even looked at them, so I wouldn't even know what to say. But there's a lot of stuff about Galactus, people revealing, these are in-game images, these are voice audio files that we're going to be seeing, all of that. And then in a similar vein, you've also had a leak of Cyberpunk. These, like, I think it was like two very seemingly high on some kind of substance gamers playing through Cyberpunk and just like committing the worst sin on the planet, which isn't leaking this game that everyone's liked about, but just taking only like a minute on the character creation. Because if you aren't spending an hour on that making your character look right screen, you aren't a gamer. That's the tell.
That's a big,
You
yeah,
can
that's a true. Who are these
um,
people?
but it's just sort of like this idea about leaks. Do you get really? Do you think leaks are cool? Because from like Ollie, you and I, from like the writing about games perspective, leaks are at least a lot about what I write about. The fact that this
Yeah,
audio files come out or
you
whatever.
got to talk about these things. Go on,
But
James.
then,
What's your opinion? Yeah.
I suppose first on the gaming sin of character creation, spending only 1 minute there. I mean, Cyberpunk 2077 has proudly showed off the fact that it's got custom genitals in this one. So I'm surprised that I feel like that's one of the striking Vipers kind of ways we're going, which I think the public may well either get up in arms about or just gain a mild curiosity towards. And on the subject of like leaks in general, I think that I hadn't actually really considered this from the perspective of kind of wanting to experience the narrative. But I suppose this kind of is the way that the proverbial cookie crumbles, right? I mean, for you guys like writing in the games industry, one of the things that's going to make the most clicks is new news about a game, especially if it's some sort of leak that we're not meant to know about. And so the headlines themselves might even say like what the actual spoilers are. I'm not sure necessarily about how many publications kind of went through with this, or kind of directed people towards the footage when The Last of Us Part 2 got leaked.
That was the
Um,
biggest, I think, the biggest gaming sort of spoiler and story leak, I'd say, of the recent memory. I can say my recent memory. The Last of Us 2, the big sort of. Well, I don't even want to spoil them here, but
I don't even know.
yeah.
Is that?
Well,
That's
I'm
the
not
thing.
going to spoil
I
it.
still know nothing. I barely know anything about the first Last of Us
Good.
game. I don't even know how
That's
that game
why I'm not
ends.
saying anything here. But there's some big spoilers which did get revealed early. Luckily, I managed to avoid most of them. I think I might have seen one, but it wasn't the biggest spoiler, anyways. Like there's things which you find very early on, anyways, and not the thing which everyone's thinking it is. A different thing as well. But if it's in these narrative ones, sort of what you said, Hamish, there about sometimes when there is story. Like I'm always reminded of the big Star. We're going to film with James's forte here. Star Wars when the Force Awakens came out, I got a bit of that spoiled for me about Han Solo. So
being told about Han Solo dying as
yeah,
well, everyone thought it was really funny. I
I
suppose
got spoiled about that.
kind of this reflection of the way we perceive like films and games about how maybe we all care a bit too much, especially when people get stupidly angry about people spoiling it, and it's like, they wouldn't do this if they were met with silence in their reaction.
Yeah.
And like whether we really want to discuss the ethics of spoiling something or not, I couldn't care less, because I think the more that conversation shines a light on people, the more they're just going to continue doing that sort of activity. It's a completely pointless conversation if you want it to stop it happening, right? I suppose if you are I think these days, especially with how connected we are, like so for Death Stranding, for example, because I really wanted this novelty of just exploring a Hideo Kojima universe that just been crafted, and for once I was stepping into it not knowing anything, because I'd played the Metal Gear Solid games before. Of course, with how famous they are, you're bound to know like the memes from it at the very least, and kind of some of the story points in certain aspects of the game as well. So I think kind of the real antidote, unless you're writing about games, in which case you just if there are leaks or not, you just kind of have to take the spoilers because you've got to write about them. I suppose from me being a casual consumer, I think that you kind of just have to shut off from pretty much all social media and not search this stuff up. To make sure that you actually
you can mute, you can mute things on a Twitter. I think I muted a few words on Twitter before The Last of Us 2 came out. I mean, I know people actually muted the hashtag PS5 share before the PS5 was released in the UK, because obviously there was a week before that when it was released in the US and other regions because of the staggered release. So I guess that goes from spoiling, but I guess if we take it the sort of before the spoils, because if you're spoiling games, someone has to have, before it comes out, that is, someone has to be the original spoiler or the original leaker. And I think the video game industry is one of these ones where there is a massive amount of people who are not, whether it's intentional to draw hype or marketing, like guerrilla marketing sort of tactics, or just because they think it's fun, or they're like, yeah, I want to get this out in the open. There's a lot of leaking which goes on. Many of sort of things like the PS5 or the Xbox Series X, all the games which are coming out, there's always rumors or leaks or some sort of industry insider who will announce this before they actually get announced at the sort of a conference or through an official thing. The Xbox Series S console was only revealed when it was because it got leaked beforehand. And I think the industry definitely has a problem with leaking. Whether I want to use the word problem is a question, but I am a bit a bit fed up of he's smug as a video game journalist. I'm not sure if it's just jealousy that I've not got this information. There's a lot of smug people on Twitter who I follow, whether they're insiders, journalists, going, "Oh, well, you're going to be excited about this announcement. Oh, I can't tell you much about this, but watch this." And I'm like, "Shut up, man."
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like what you said, James, because it was, I think you are right. There's an element of, if people didn't have a big reaction to getting spoiled, then probably people wouldn't do it. That's why people do a lot of things online, is like, they love spoiling some film or video game or whatever it is, and because they know when they do it, someone's going to get really angry at them, and it will probably get, these two guys that shared the Cyberpunk stuff. Part of the reason we know about it, even if we haven't watched it, is everyone's been talking about it. Everyone's been sharing this video, or even if they don't share the video, they've been referencing in tweets. And that's, maybe part of the reason why these two guys put this video out there, was to sort of gain notoriety. So if we didn't talk about it, then maybe it wouldn't keep happening. But there is also sort of, I think there's also like a balance with leaking. Most of the time, if it's, say, to use Fortnite, because I think there's two really distinct things there. If it's like a skin, I feel like most Fortnite skins are fun to leak, because you can get a little bit hype. There's that element of, has this person just doctored this image, for the upcoming season 5. There've been a couple of people suggesting that, like, the Mandalorian's going to be coming out as a skin, and while some of the images look real, and they seem to come from credible sources, it's also like, well, this one or two of the images, I thought, well, that looks a lot just like someone's photoshopped the PNG. It doesn't actually look that much like a typical Fortnite skin graphics to me. So has someone just made this up? And there's that fun back and forth trying to work it out. But then when it gets really in depth, particularly about, like, this big event which everyone's been hyping up and building up, it can be really a bit disappointing to be like, oh, well, that we now know all these audio files and we have all of this stuff, we kind of know what's going to happen. And I think it does kind of ruin the moment for you, and these people then do feel really smug, as you say, Ollie. It's like, come on, guy, just, like, let us be fun. Or it's like, if something big's happening at the Game Awards, like, don't hint that it's going to be something's going to be there. Like, let us find out, because I think that would be so much better than someone sort of pre-warning you that something cool's going to happen. Which I think what a good example was
the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate reveal. No one, well, people saw it come, but no one was that expecting it.
Everyone is here thing, like, no one expected that, and it is sort of this get hype moment of like, oh damn, like, this is amazing. The best reveals are the ones that just take you out of left field in the best kind of ways. But yeah, I think that there's definitely this balance with leaking, but I think when it comes to sort of big story stuff, you really should just leave it alone. But yeah, then try not, if it does happen, try not to engage with it, because also the problem with online stuff is, if you engage with something, like you comment on it, suddenly Twitter thinks, this is important, and it starts bumping up the rankings, and then suddenly you've kind of had the reverse effect of making it really prominent.
Definitely.
And in terms
of, do you guys think of leaks when when it just turns out to not be true? Because I can't remember the amount of times me and Ollie have actually had the conversation of, if Silent Hill gets announced at this event, can I do an article on it, please? I think we've at least 3 times I've sent that message to him.
It's always the 4chan leaks as well. It's always 4chan. Never trust anything on 4chan in the games industry. That's my rule now.
I can't remember where I've seen these sources from, but there have been just any kind of rumors about Silent Hill, like, coming back up, about Sony potentially buying the Silent Hill IP. All of these, or Sony being some sort of mediator, please work with Hideo Kojima again. He was so reliably bankable for you guys. Please do something with your IP.
I think lots of them are more leaks in the hope that it happens, rather than leaks that actually will.
If we
be
speak
true.
it into existence, then it should happen.
If they do these things and they get it trending, they're like hoping, maybe it might happen. After Xbox bought Bethesda, and everyone was like, Sony, please buy Konami. Sony's going to buy Konami in response, and they got it trending. I think some people were hoping it would lead to Sony being like, well, these people want us to buy Konami. We might as well do it. Might as well
A
not
purchase
disappoint.
doesn't happen overnight, particularly two massive
That's the
companies. It
thing,
could,
yeah.
like, how long was the Bethesda one? It was like
Probably
a
is.
year.
I mean, it's
wasn't
not
it?
even finished yet. You know, it'll finish halfway through
Exactly.
next year, so it'll be a
So,
waste.
right,
It's one of these
one
Yeah,
things.
yeah. I always feel like if with a leak, it's sort of like, well, if I've got to look at something, it's like, well, what's this person's track record? If it's decent, then 9 times out of 10 they're probably going to be right. And if they're wrong, then they're often just wrong on their timing. So like sometimes it's been, oh, this is coming in the next patch, and it might not come in the next patch, it might come in the one after that. So there's still some credibility there. For these other ones, then like the buying of Konami properties, whatever, it's like, well, what's actually been said and what's actually happening? Okay, and then how much of this is people just really wanting something to exist, and how much is it me wanting it to exist or someone else wanting to exist? Sometimes it can be worth talking about it, but then also just sort of throwing in, yeah, there's this huge, not just pinch of salt, like mountain of salt that you've got to take with this, because otherwise, except there's a lot of us hoping to will it into existence rather than it necessarily already being true.
Definitely.
And then I feel like we've got I think it's our last news story of the day.
It is. It's our last news story of the day, and then
kind of one on like Twitter outrage, but in a very different way. It's all against Nintendo this time. They do crop up. Don't worry, everyone. It is that the Big House Smash Bros competition has had to be cancelled this year. That's because obviously COVID-19, people can't meet up in person. So if you want to play a fighting game, you have to play it online. And for some games that works really, really well, but unfortunately for Super Smash Bros. Melee, you can't play that online. So they were trying to use sort of a ROM of it and a Slippy Online mod, as it's called. And basically Nintendo went, you can't do that, and have banned the tournament from being able to happen this year, effectively. Sent them a cease and desist.
Yeah, Nintendo love sending cease and desists out. They love sending out the Nintendo ninjas or the lawyers who are behind these. They are, for a company who are seen as a sort of wholesome, friendly face of gaming. They are very hard. Not harsh. That's not probably the right word. They are very tight on some of these sort of things, which might be. I mean, fair enough. This might be misusing their proper software. But Super Smash Bros. Melee it's a staple. I'm gonna trigger a lot of fighting game fans if I say it's a staple of the fighting game community, because lots of people don't think it's a fighting game, the Smash Bros. Games. But it's one of these iconic. It's a whole big thing. People are very very angry about this, and we could have someone on to debate this, and it would be very interesting. But people, Melee is an iconic franchise. You listen to one of the biggest memes in gaming is the Wombo Combo. Everyone knows the Wombo Combo. So all these type things, and it's one of these things. And obviously because it's I don't know, when it was released 2003, maybe it was an Xbox. No, wow, that's wrong. GameCube game.
Yeah.
It's a GameCube game, so it doesn't have internet. It never was released with an internet patch. Nintendo obviously have never released this game again, if not remastered it, not remade it. 2001, there we are.
Yeah, 19
They've never
years
remade
old.
this game.
Exactly.
19 years.
This is where I'm with you at it, because it's a game that people really like playing, and it's not going to get remade because Nintendo, there's no point in remaking it. As far as Nintendo kind of sees it, they've got the next Smash Bros. Melee remake. It's Smash Bros. Ultimate because it has all the characters in and all of that stuff. But obviously for fans, it plays differently, and all the characters work differently. It's all the mechanics. I feel like it would almost be impossible to remake.
Yeah, if it was remade or remastered, they'd have to leave every single mechanic alone. Like it would literally just have to be like they're here. We'll add online, but and then we might make the skins look better.
But even then, even if they change the skins, that could change the pixel measurements. The fans, that could change even minor details. I feel like for some of these people. And so then at the end of the day, for me, seeing this, on the one hand, there is a thing about how you do have to protect your copyright. Part of the reason that some people often get angry at these companies, like, oh, well, why are you doing this? It's like, well, because if they don't protect their copyright on this seemingly small infraction, later down the line, there could be a legal challenge against some larger infraction and they'd lose it. So they have to do it on everything. But then also, then the other half of me goes, well, at the end of the day, you're not making any money from Smash Bros. Melee anymore, you know, and no one can buy a copy of Melee, really, you know.
And if they do, they won't be giving money to Nintendo. It'll be,
exactly.
you know,
so
making.
Just let people do this, and I don't feel like someone's going to pick up Melee at the expense of picking up Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. They're servicing such different events, and like if you've got a big tournament or event, you know, these can be these moments where it's like, oh well, that looks really cool, you know, that person doing that awesome combo, maybe this is a game that I want to get into, or I want to invest in this game even if I already have it, and that's really awesome for people. So then obviously online tournaments are the only option this year, so then to stop one of these tournaments for one of your games sort of happening and being allowed to happen seems like a pretty dick move. You know, just let people play video games, Nintendo. Really,
definitely.
It's a real shame.
Yeah, I disagree with Ollie in terms of Smash Bros. As a franchise being kind of cornerstones. A cornerstone of the fighting game genre. I would say that Melee definitely, for its history and its legacy, is. I think, the only real way that Nintendo can make money off of this, as you guys have said, is remaking it. But I think Nintendo, out of the major console manufacturers and major publishers in general, are the ones who are kind of the most averse to esports and haven't really tapped into it yet. But I suppose, like, what is there to make an esport out of, really, apart from Smash as a franchise and Splatoon as a franchise?
Yeah, they they've a very weird relationship with sort of competitive gaming. You know, they say they support it, but I don't know if it's they don't fully understand it properly yet. They don't really want, or they don't want to engage with the sort of communities behind these things. But you know, it was just
they want to make sure
another
people
one.
Have showers. Nintendo players have to have showers. That's in like the contract if you read it. So that's why they always get angry about it.
Oh, of course. Blame me. Really hope we don't have any Super Smash Bros. Players listening to this today.
It's the meme. It's the
they'll
meme.
They'll be too busy tweeting to Nintendo about them not
exactly.
play Super Smash Bros. So.
They're not paying attention. Can I talk about another? Just as well, I remember like another kind of dick Nintendo thing. Talking about Pokemon. Pokemon Go has just added connectivity to Pokemon Home. Pokemon Go, Pokemon Home, so you can send Pokemon from Pokemon Go to Pokemon Home. But they have a really dumb energy system that can take like a week to recharge, and so you can only send, I think, you can send like 4 or 5 shiny Pokemon a week, or 1 shiny legendary Pokemon, or otherwise you can just send as many other Pokemon as you want. But considering that really to be able to send loads of Pokemon, you have to be paying for Pokemon Home, and which I do because I want to make sure I can keep all my Pokemon safe. It's really then kind of rubbish that I can send like 4 or so Pokemon a week, because the shiny ones are the ones you want to send over to add to your collection. At least I do. And it's a real shame. And or if you want to do it faster than 1 week, you have to pay like quite a bit of money to be able to afford the coins. Or
that's what it comes down to. The bottom line.
Yeah.
They're making that money from nostalgic Pokemon fans wanting to add, or just Pokemon fans wanting to get all these ones transferred across. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. You know, they do love the Pokemon franchise, getting loads of as much money as they can from what is probably their biggest franchise. So, Nintendo, yes. Oh dear. Well, we can put Nintendo behind us now and move away from their sort of online. You know, if you've ever played the Super Smash Bros. Story, you'll know they're less than impressive single-player online story modes.
Super Smash Bros. I think Super Smash Bros. Brawl had one of the best stories in any video game ever.
Was okay. It was okay. Well, I'll give you that.
Boring. I've played it, and it's just
it's a bit generic.
So boring.
We can move on to yes, James's favorite topic.
Sonic shows up and he helps them defeat Taboo.
Oh dear.
Hamish, just stop talking.
They had to go fast to beat the cool blue guy.
Unfortunately, I don't agree with you here, Hamish. I know. Before we get bogged down on the specifics of this and fully detailed analysis of the Subspace Emery campaign, we'll introduce. James is obviously, we talked about the start. He introduced himself as the film editor, and fully on brand for that role. We've had many discussions in the past about the narrative, sort of way games portray themselves and narratives developers put in games, the narratives which are sort of reinforced in these games, and how well they translate into games. So just to start us off here, because I know it's a big topic, narrative in video games. Sometimes companies have hundreds, if not thousands, of people writing these narratives in their games. So, Tim, just to get your thoughts on where you stand generically on narratives in video games, what is more important to you in a game, the narrative or the gameplay?
I think that's a bit of a loaded question, and
It's a very loaded
I don't like the assumption that there necessarily has to be a compromise, because I think the very best in narrative games make sure that in terms of the gameplay and story and the themes that it's meant to represent, the way that you interact with the world is reflected in your character's journey, be that like an established character like in either Spec Ops: The Line or Silent Hill 2, or if it's an RPG as well, it's kind of this very organic you exploring the world idea behind it. Instead, think the early Fallout or Disco Elysium, even, I always mispronounce that. And there doesn't necessarily need to be this kind of compromise between story and gameplay, especially when you think within gameplay, there's then the established atmosphere that comes from the music, the sound effects, and the visual style, a whole number of other kind of little things as well, and kind of like movement animations as well, and startup frames for fighting attacks and things like that, which can really define an atmosphere and really kind of convey about your character, about the location of the game, about the story, about the themes that the game's trying to convey. And I don't think that necessarily needs to lead to a compromise between story and gameplay. Rather, I'd say that it enhances both of them, for the fact that you're using elements of a video game which you would not get if the genre wasn't as interactive as it was. Whereas, if you try and convey these in the film, obviously you have kind of all the facets that a video game do, minus the interactability. It's the games that really then go on to use that interactability, which I think produce the best stories and most impactful experiences, in my opinion.
So what game would you say is your quintessential, the game which uses
the answer,
which uses a narrative and the gameplay together? Silent Hill 2, you would say makes what? Just for those who aren't familiar with Silent Hill 2, what is the sort of, why is it such an impactful? It gets these people, it gets you involved in both the story and the gameplay, and sort of symbiotic relationship. What makes it so good to you?
But the thing is you play it, and by today's standards, the gameplay is quite clunky in terms of using tank controls, and also in terms of how bad James Sunderland is when it comes to actual combat scenarios. So really, what's going on here when you're actually fighting one of these creatures? What I said about startup frames, I saw a whole YouTube video about this, and I was absolutely fascinated. James Sunderland's startup frames are so much slower than, say, for example, Link's are throughout the Legend of Zelda game, because he is basically you want him portrayed as this completely helpless man alone in this town where a whole bunch of monstrosities are after him, right? And so that's what I think really kind of adds to the loneliness there. In terms of how it uses general not Silent Hill horror, survival horror tropes, in terms of basically you're running around certain buildings, assembling items, and it's kind of adventure gamey logic in places, but it's finding a bunch of coins that you slot into a wall and it gives you some key, and then you explore a bunch of other places, and eventually you open a box, gives you another key that lets you finally leave the building. And it's all about that kind of feeling of also not only having to deal with the monsters that you can see actively around the place. I think in terms of the Pyramid Head as well, being the absolute icon he is, not only of the Silent Hill franchise but survival horror in general.
An iconic video game character, definitely.
Yeah.
completely. The way you're introduced to him is outside of a cutscene. You go back to this place where you've been before, having collected an item, and he's just behind this other side of a cage. And all he does is just stand there and look at you, and it's so genius because suddenly, like in the back of your mind, you're just like, this guy's stalking me, and then you get an actual introduction of him in a cutscene, and the contents of the cutscene are probably too explicit for me to mention here. It's very violent. And from there, at other points in the game, he just pops up randomly, and and comes to completely terrorize you. And I think that's other element to it of adding to the helplessness and being stalked by someone who could clearly have you on toast if he wanted. Really, what makes the gameplay so powerful. And the story itself is about James trying to find his dead wife. And when you replay it, you realize kind of the symbolism that's dropped in throughout all like aspects of the game in terms of the setting, in terms of notes that you find scattered around the place, in terms of even the monster design and what it represents in James's story. So the symbolism of the themes that are being conveyed as well, it's got this real kind of balance of the surface of actually playing the game being incredibly terrifying, versus along with this kind of symbolic narrative that's going on under the hood, makes it stick with you so powerfully after the fact as well, and how it deals with kind of very human themes of guilt and lust and those other things
so
as well.
it does present a powerful sort of storyline that resonates with you, is what you would sort of say, and that's enhanced by the gameplay. Because
definitely,
and it's I agree with you. It's a very ingenious move. And I know one of the topic which I think we've talked about before, which
yes,
I'd love to hear your thoughts about, is sort of how hard it is for developers to strike this balance, or to find this perfect sort of niche where you can create a game where you have the gameplay, it's all have the gameplay complementing the narrative and vice versa. And I think it's the term which is used sort of, I gave a very simplified, clunky definition there of ludonarrative dissonance. So the idea of where you have a narrative which goes one way, and this is just not reflected in the gameplay at all. James, so we've talked about this in the past, ludonarrative
yes.
dissonance. Does this matter to you if you play a game and the narrative? So I think the example which everyone always uses is Uncharted 4. If your gameplay is so unconnected in terms of your character acts one way in the
general,
cutscene,
really, yeah,
acts one way in a cutscene and acts a completely different way when you're playing them, does that for you take the mean narratives in games can never truly, unless they sort of solve this issue, they can never be as good as like a film or a TV show, for example? Is it always going to limit the ability of the game to tell a story if ultimately players have this choice to not follow the storyline, as in the character would actually do so?
I think the thing is with ludonarrative dissonance is I think Uncharted, in the context you mentioned it, would be not the example I go for, because Uncharted, basically you're meant to be this happy-go-lucky adventurer. You are a mass murdering machine, and you never seem to show any form of guilt for all of the lives that you've ended, which is the part that I find kind of most extraordinary about it. And that's the part that's always the most puzzling when you actually go back and look at it. I think the problem with Uncharted as well is that its gameplay was really was never that innovative in terms of its climbing and its shooting and everything. The only thing really ever going for it was the story. And once it was repeating itself,
games anyways.
yeah. To be fair, once it was really repeating itself in Uncharted 3, and then tried to retcon a brother in for Uncharted 4, I just remember being really bored, like with both of those games. Uncharted 1 and 2, I both really enjoyed, but I don't want to replay them because I probably wouldn't like them if I replayed them. I think in terms of what you were suggesting with having a choice. What I'd use as an example in terms of ludonarrative dissonance in that sense would be Watch Dogs and Watch Dogs 2, because Watch Dogs 2 especially, you're meant to be this happy-go-lucky vigilante, and you're meant to be also worse than the bad guys. As soon as you load up into the game, you can just nothing is stopping you from just carjacking someone and then just running over as many people as you want. Even in Aidan Pierce's story, like the whole idea is that he's avenging his niece. If he then just you fully have the power to just get out of your car, just pick up your pistol and then just shoot down people in the streets, and then suddenly the character's becoming a lot less sympathetic
But what I liked
because you're
about
just mowing down people.
I don't know whether it had in Watch Dogs 2, but one of the things I really liked about Watch Dogs was it gave you choices throughout, and actually you could go out and mow people down the street, but then the way that people perceive you lowers and you get seen less of. I think I tried to play as like a good guy, so like a vigilante, so I preferred weapons that didn't kill, they just like knocked people unconscious, and tried to like keep casualties to a zero minimum. And whereas but it had like a scale. If you were a bad guy, I think it meant that cops were more likely to get called on you. You were likely to be recognized in the street. Whereas if you were playing like a good way, then you have this other option. I think I don't know. I think it in that way it tried to introduce this kind of idea. It was like it's like the Batman thing. Do you when in some Batman universes his parents get killed and he's trying to avenge their deaths, so he goes, I'm not going to kill people. Whereas in some other franchises he goes out and wants to do the harm that was done to him. So I think there's like two options there where you can sort of take whichever road you want. And I don't know, that for me that feels really, really fun, and that adds to the gameplay of it when you get that choice.
Yeah, well, this is another thing with interactive narratives is, of course, that you can then have these games which branch out and have some sort of choice, which then go on to personalize the narrative. In that sense, I don't think the first Watch Dogs really did enough of that, especially in key story missions, to completely validate your point. But yeah, I certainly understand where you're going with that. I certainly agree that had it.
I remember like some of like the overarching stuff. I think there are other there were other parts in the game where I was like, oh yeah, it's not really that deep. I think it stuck with me a lot because it was one of the first few games that I'd played where like my actions impact the story, and that was me missing out on like other RPGs along the way that like had that big an impact. RPGs that I were used to were games like Legend of Zelda, where like you really only have one option. You have to go and save the princess at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think Watch Dogs had like more of that choice, especially within main story missions, which I don't remember it having. I've played that game a couple of times.
The only one was the last mission, was you had an actual choice. You could choose whether to kill the guy that had murdered your niece or was involved in the death of your niece. I think that was it.
You could choose to stop his pacifier, couldn't you?
Yeah, so you could choose to kill
his pacemaker. That's the one. Yeah. I didn't realize that was a choice. I just killed him. So.
Oh yeah, no, I chose not to kill him in the end.
I never even realized that was a choice. But yeah, having it once right at the end, I just thought it was quite clever as a method of killing him. He's back in his like little glass cage, and he thinks he's completely safe, but he doesn't realize that you can hack his pacemaker. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, no, I thought that was cool as well. I think there's also really cool things. I mean, because now there's lots of these big choice games like Telltale, when they were around. I guess they're kind of coming back, and like Don't Nod have made their living on games where you can sort of like choose the narrative. And I guess in that way though, I feel like there are some elements that I do like where they have tried to make those games feel like a little bit more real. You can't just wait on a decision for like 5 minutes and try to work out all the options. They've introduced a slow like ticking time bar, and actually not giving a response in like a normal period of time can then mean that different things will happen as well. Like I think that's really, really cool as well, because I think giving players a choice can make a game feel a bit more real. I've talked a lot about Destiny 2 a lot recently because it's what I've been playing, and actually it's only just occurred to me that it's not an RPG. A lot of people call it like trying to play it being an MMO, but it's really not, because you don't get to make the decision in the story. If I was playing this, there are basically at the end of the Forsaken DLC, which is a bit old at this point, it's assumed that you kill the person that killed Cade, and you just complete your like vendetta against this person. So you become a murderer effectively rather than just a savior. And then the most recent game, the update is you have to take on the power of darkness. You don't get to choose to remain a guardian of the light. You have to choose the darkness, otherwise you don't get to continue the campaign. And so, in the one hand, it's been kind of fun actually getting to play as this, but then also it's that dissonance between less on the gameplay and the story, but on me and the character I'd want to play, because it's like it's always felt like, oh, I can make my choices, but then it sort of occurs to me as well, no, I don't. I'm playing the story that Bungie want me to play, and the character that Bungie want me to play is this person that will enact their revenge, and for the sake of trying to protect people, will do whatever it takes, which includes working with the bad guys. In this case.
So I think the question I guess we could ask, sort of now from what you guys have said, you've been talking about these games which they sort of force you into this sort of line of a story, a very linear sort of, this is how it's going to play. I think if you know a YouTuber called Nakey Jakey, it's a very niche reference. His sort of idea is, the way his example is Red Dead Redemption 2, if you've ever played that. Going back to Hamish, you'll have a lot of these Lego blocks. His idea is you have a game, and games and open worlds and sandboxes, these games are like a big bucket of Lego. So you have a big bucket of Lego, and you get to put all these pieces together, make a house, or make whatever you want. And loads of people enjoy doing that. On the other hand, you have all these other games which are a Lego set. They are the Sesame Street ones which you got. They are the Mandalorian ships, and it tells you how to make these games, and it tells you how to do these stories. And I guess, the most popular, what Lego now does is it makes these sets, it makes these are the ones which sell. And I think it translates to games. So is it hard, James? Would you say is it too difficult, especially for smaller studios like indie studios or studios where they might not be as experienced, they might have not made as many games in the past, to make these sort of storylines where they're branching out or they give them choices? Is it hard to make these as entertaining or as satisfying sort of storylines where you can, no matter how you play it, you could go with a different storyline, but ultimately it has to be entertaining? Do you think it's a really hard sort of thing, or what should game studios do to make sure they can strike that balance between making it entertaining but also making it customizable and personal?
That's a really good question. I think that don't necessarily need to have both in the game, because if we go back to Silent Hill 2 as an example, that's as linear as you can get, right? And it is the sole reason whenever like linear versus open world or non-linear or whatever comes up as a conversation, I hate that conversation. Whoever is trying to start that conversation needs to sit down, play Silent Hill 2, and come back to me and log out, just stop writing articles, temporarily go on some sort of research break, and just play some actually really good linear games like that, like Spec Ops: The Line as well, which has an element of choice but is predominantly linear for the most part. Even the first Call of Duty Modern Warfare is another really good example of a linear narrative. Then actually realize that conversation's so pointless. Like, these games all have their own place, right? When it comes to branching narratives instead, I think the best indie game example I can think of is Disco Elysium, mentioned earlier. You get so many different conversation paths that you can go down, and so many different outcomes to different key moments in that game. The story, still continues on regardless. It's very much structured off of D&D.
Yeah.
This classic old school role-playing game. But obviously you're this detective in a sci-fi world, and that game's absolutely brilliant. It's one of my favorites. Played through it twice.
Is the game always the same?
Yeah. I think there is, depending on the check that you do with the cryptid, but yes, the murder is the same every time.
Okay, because that the cryptid was the thing I was wondering about, because it's because I think I really there were for the most part I really enjoyed Disco Elysium. I enjoyed that exploration side of things. You mentioned it to D&D. That's one thing, the sort of, it focused on the RP side of D&D. Who do you ask questions? How do you approach asking them questions? And that's the thing I love most about that tabletop game. So then playing a video game was awesome. The thing I did always struggle with, though, was there's so much text in Disco Elysium, and as a dyslexic, it can be really difficult to just deal with lots of white text. I think I said the one thing I would
really need to be in the mood for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd just be like
really need to be in the mood.
The one thing I wish they did was just like maybe have like a highlight function that would just be like, okay, we understand that you're meant to read through all of this, but to help out some people, like we'll just highlight the important bits of information. So if you are in that mood where you just can't read like a whole paragraph, we just be like, okay, here are a couple of lines that you are like the key information here.
A TLDR sort of.
Quick TLDR.
Yeah, definitely. I
I
agree
did always
with
wonder
you.
if like my choices really mattered overall, but I also didn't mind. I also am one of those people that doesn't always mind if sort of whether I've gone down the left road or the right road, I still end up at the same destination. Like a lot of people say like, oh, it's a cheat at the end of this game. It doesn't matter all my other decisions. I think like Mass Effect 3 is one that people often think about. It's just like at the end of the day, my decisions don't matter because I still kind of get the same result. It just changes the color of this explosion or whatever. But it's like, well, sure, if you're playing it to just get from point A to point B. But for me, a lot of video game is I enjoy those character interactions. Yeah, they're not real, but I enjoy getting to talk to somebody as I do, like as in Disco Elysium. Like, am I going to go and how am I going to go and talk to these two kids in this sort of path next to this dead man? Am I gonna kind of go down to their level and act like a 5-year-old? Am I going to try and pretend to be an adult for 5 minutes? And yeah, I think that I love that kind of element of it because it's so much fun to explore.
I think the thing is with Disco Elysium as well that it does so well and so uniquely as its story is because of this kind of very wacky premise. You've got so obliteratedly like drunk the night before that you've completely forgotten any sense of like who you are. I really love this sense of one, this rebuilding of this man, of his personal identity, and how his past like constantly comes back to haunt him, and how the way that in gameplay taking drugs will actually boost your stats as well. Also potentially kind of showing that like kind of this commentary on how bad like difficult it is to break this cycle of addiction that this man has gone down, especially with his like self-loathing and clearly just this lack of mental health in him, and the element of being a detective. So you're kind of exploring the highs and lows of this fictional society, which obviously reflects real things about the society which we live in. I think is just a genius combination that makes it so interesting throughout, and just got engaging characters, such varied personalities, and the writing was so strong throughout is what makes that truly special. There's another game with a branching narrative, which I'd say is probably the best example of where your choices really matter, is probably Undertale, which of course is an indie game as well. I think it doesn't necessarily matter in terms of whether you want to go with a linear or a branching narrative, no matter who you are. But because Toby Fox was just this guy. He's clearly a really creative guy, a very talented guy, and Undertale was such a hit. Kind of off of the back of him and the other people who helped him. And same with the comparatively small team that worked on Disco Elysium. These guys are just very creative, very talented people who managed to make these games, which while they don't have the budgets of all these AAA games, still managed to blow them out the water in terms of narrative richness and narrative quality. Undertale as well is another one of these games that I think's got a really strong symbolic narrative to it. I don't think the surface level narrative is as strong as people think it is. I suppose the humor didn't really click with me, was probably the main issue there. I think that might say something about how bad my sense of humor is, though, because the only time I laughed was when I named my character Jeff at the start, and then the rest of it, I didn't laugh throughout. So that may just well be my fault more than anything else. Yeah. So I think in terms of making it entertaining, though, which was your question, I suppose the thing is that I suppose with these games, perhaps as well, you've got to realize that you're not appealing to every gamer, because there are going to be people who play RPGs and really get into RPGs and love this fact that you can just sink yourself into this character and properly roleplay as them. There are going to be people I suppose, like me, who prefer having these established characters that you're then filling in the shoes of. Like James Sunderland, Sam Porter Bridges, I suppose Batman in the Arkham trilogy as well is a good example. Boar in Go Elysium. So yeah, that's probably how you kind of strike that balance. I think it depends on the developers themselves and the writers themselves and what they really want to go for. Just make something that they'd enjoy playing is I'd say my advice would be. But
I have a question, which because I'm going to try and link it to film, but if I get something wrong about like my knowledge, then whatever. But because you talked about how like if you like some of these branching narrative games like Disco Elysium, Undertale, I say to extend like games by like Don't Nod, like Life is Strange, which is kind of indie in a way, but the fact that they can sort of, because in my head I'm thinking, well, like the thing that doesn't maybe cost as much to do would be just writing out more stuff. Like you can write out more and more pages, whereas trying to get these really high complex graphics and physics engines and all of that would take a lot of development time and a huge amount of budget. So for these indie games, they can do that because they have to focus on their story and their plot, because that's really the key thing that's going for them. And sort of, do you think that's then the benefit of going indie? Because also when thinking about films, like a lot of people might think of like the Marvel films, like these big blockbuster but awesome spectacles. They're brilliant to watch, but they fall into the trap of being a little bit too samey because they want to play it safe. Whereas if you then look at some of these smaller films, they're the ones that are going to go out and do well at big awards, or like at the Oscars, or at festivals, and people are going to really resonate with those because they're willing to take a risk, because the risk is the thing that's going to get them noticed, pulling off well, rather than because they can't afford the best CGI in the world or any of that kind of stuff. I think that's sort of like a factor, sort of like focusing on what you can do with your money, and therefore you have to be good at the things you can do.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I suppose having that kind of constraint there is also something to help in terms of with your creativity as well, right? I think it's those kind of constraints that people being creative and trying to work and get past these constraints as well. I suppose you then do have to code in these scenes in the branching narrative.
Yeah.
And the issue that I think with especially Telltale got before they had to close down, the main thing is the choice kind of felt like a gimmick by that point. I think the two best games that have done the Telltale style game have to be Life is Strange, but I'm going to qualify that and say only Life is Strange episodes 1 to 4. If I were to recommend Life is Strange to someone, I would say ignore all of the parts of the story about Arcadia Bay being destroyed, that storm is not happening, and make up your own ending to episode 5. Because I think episode 5 is just so like bad in terms of how it concludes the whole season. And like it, I think it seemed a bit like, what really annoyed me was I did enjoy it when it decided with the science, just have these time bending powers and get into this high school drama, because the central relationship between Max and Chloe is so powerful and really charming, and you really come to care for those two characters and most of the supporting cast as well. And I think that's probably like one of the most powerful leading duos in any sort of game. Even though the ending final choice, which I won't spoil, was in my mind a complete abuse of then deciding, no, we're going to actually try and explain chaos theory, but in that bastardized media way that it always gets explained about the butterfly flapping its wings or whatever. That really upset me, to be honest.
Like
more than the look, that really annoyed me. And I still felt bad with the decision I made of whichever one it may be. And yeah, the other one I will say, the first season of The Walking Dead was also the one where, maybe because that was probably the first one I played, or one of the first I played with the choices element going on. So I was really impressed by that. But also it just had a strong cast of characters with it as well, which I think those games live or die on. as well as making sure the choices don't feel gimmicky. You just want that really strong cast of characters. So the Tales from the Borderlands is fine. Batman one's rubbish. I really hated that one, and I love Batman.
I really liked the Batman ones. I'm gonna sit here and be like, I really enjoyed it.
I didn't like it. I like the one choice where you could choose to impale Falcone on that bit of building that had fallen off, or you could just choose to spare him, because I like the idea of Batman just like really losing it and deciding he'd make a symbol of Falcone by impaling him on that spike. That one thing I thought was kind of like peak Batman in a sense, but
yeah,
most of the rest of the time, yeah, I didn't particularly enjoy it.
No.
I enjoyed it from the comic book aspect. I'd say I also, in many ways, I really preferred Before the Storm to the original Life is Strange. I think because it had a lot of those good elements, and I don't know, like it felt, because it didn't really have the magic powers involved. It felt a bit more grounded, but it's a prequel, so you kind of know what's going to happen to some of these characters. Like it focuses on my headphone fell out. Focuses on Chloe and Rachel, and obviously like the whole time that it's not going to end well for at least one of those characters. And I thought that was a really fun thing. I haven't finished Life is Strange 2, but that seemed good as well. I liked the parallels it was doing with like immigration and stuff. And then Tell Me Why I've played the first episode and I've really liked it so far. So it's a bit weird. I feel like I know a little bit to start making guesses, but not enough to know really what's going on. So I want to pursue that further.
Nice. Yeah. So before we run out of time,
so much about this.
we've some very good discussions here. I think the final thing we'll say, which because I don't want to spend too much time on it, because it's one of these topics which is always overplayed and always sort of satirized and then repeated in the games and the wider games sort of thing. What can a game be an artistic expression? Can a video game narrative be art to you? Yes,
it can. I hate this question because it's a very simple answer. Yes.
Yes.
Such an awful, but because I think
you have to ask it, but yes.
As gamers as we are, and I hate using that word, it's become so tainted.
I never use the word gamer.
But yeah, exactly. Like this is the thing. It carries so many. It carries so many bad connotations, as well as the gaming community in general, and people's prejudices towards interactive narratives. Are tainted by games like Call of Duty and things like that, which don't really aim for that. They just aim to let you just shoot up places. And you've also got games like FIFA as well, which are basically just made to scam kids.
Did you never play The Journey? And you clearly are missing out on a great story.
I played all 3 journeys, and I don't know why. I just genuinely don't know why I did it to myself. I wanted to test the level of detail in it, so I scored an own goal in the demo. I scored an own goal in the demo just to see whether they asked me about it or not, and they just didn't. And it's like, you literally just watched me run the ball into my own net.
Great job, mate. Great job.
You watched all of my other teammates watch me run the ball into my own net. Do you not think Gary Lineker and the boys are going to have some questions to ask about this teenager on his debut just running the ball into his net to make it 2-1 to the other team? Like,
I'm surprised they didn't, because I feel like that's the sort of thing that you'd put an Easter egg in, at least, like some kind of
come on.
They'd have thought about it. Because then that'd be
you had other things like that.
Oh, if you run the ball into your own net, they make fun of you.
And nothing changed with the story, no matter what. Like, maybe based on performance, like Alex Hunter's a bit sad in places, but there wasn't enough detail there. And with the press conferences as well, it's so silly. Even in like the new FIFA's career mode, my brother was telling me about this, how he was selecting things randomly, and he got asked about Dominic Calvert-Lewin playing for Everton in his Arsenal career mode when he'd just beaten Everton 3-0. And by selecting something randomly, his manager then said it was a joy to watch him play, which, when you think about it, is one of the most disrespectful things to say about an opposition striker when their team has just lost 3-0.
I love to see it. That's absolute mind games, that is. Oh.
Yeah.
No, but yeah,
yes. can be art. Play Silent Hill 2, play Disco Elysium, play Death Stranding. Death Stranding, in terms of its gameplay, a lot of people think it's boring. I think it's a really good way of reflecting the theme of isolation. When you're just kind of on your own that entire time, having to walk through. It's really meditative in that sense. I think it's a really mature game. Obviously, not a lot of people have the time or attention span for, and like, fair enough if you don't. Won't begrudge you too much, but for me personally, I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Fantastic game. Disappointing ending section.
I quite like the ending section. It was good fun. Some of the symbolism gets really on the nose, but it's just not Kojima without some stupidly on the nose symbolism.
Like, what do you expect?
When he was like,
the right thing in there.
Yeah.
There we have it. Video games good. Video games art. Silent Hill play. You know, and watch out for it at this year's Game Awards. My prediction is it will be there.
I think me and Silent Hill.
James will buy the PS5
when is the
when
Game
he sees
Awards?
that. It's a couple of weeks, I think. I want to say 13th or
I always
so.
felt like the award, like the nomination. Yeah, I always felt like the nominations came out really close to it, but I just thought it was closer.
Yes. So if you you know, we'll see in a few weeks if James decides to buy a PS5.
Should we do a watch along? What time is it UK? Oh wait. Oh no,
it's late in the UK. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, it's
look,
Friday.
my sleep schedule's so ruined that I am happy to join in any sort of watch along.
It will be a Friday at midnight. Oh no, at 12 a.m. Wait, is it?
Yeah,
is it midnight in the morning or
in the morning? Yeah, it's at midnight for us. I know that because it was last year. Okay,
but is it going to be midnight on or like morning Friday or evening, like late night Friday going into Saturday? Because if it's Thursday into Friday, I probably can't. But if it's Friday into Saturday, we could just take Saturday off.
I think it is. It's on a Friday night.
Friday night. So
my best Hamish impression if he can't be here.
There we are. You've almost got the hair. The hair's quite similar.
It's on its way. Yeah.
Right.
Before we talk about Celeste every other. Well, I didn't actually do it this week.
No Celeste this week. Just Destiny.
But that's a game that ties in gameplay and narrative perfectly. It fits right into this topic.
Right.
I suppose From Software is their own topic, which we haven't really covered, and From Software inspired games, which are worth their own podcast, which I'm happy to come back on if you want me back.
There we are. We're always happy to have people on again. We've not on again twice. They must hate us a bit, but we're always happy to have more people on more than once. Before we go, James, I think this is something you when I came on your podcast. Anything you want to shout out? Give any sort of shout outs to? What are you working on at the moment?
I am working on my degree, I suppose. Is what I'm working on. Shout out my lecturers, right? Shout out my assignments. Apart from that, if you follow me at J_Palmer2, it's been a lot of complaints about the state of academic textbooks at the moment. Very niche. They are quite disagreeable. As well, follow at Boar Film on Twitter, at the Boar Film on Instagram as well. We should actually have a YouTube video out soon about a film called Come and See, which on the subject of just narratives itself, that is one of the best narrative films of all time, and anyone who watches it and says otherwise, like my brother, is a bit of an idiot. So definitely recommend a watch once it's out. The Boar Film podcast is still about, so if you can catch my episodes with Ollie.
Watch out, that's a very good one.
An absolutely beautiful one. Yeah. That's the one I'd recommend as well. Hamish, I know you're a big boy journalist now. You're not a student journalist really like the rest of us. So maybe we'll have you on at some point as well if you really want, if you have the spare time.
Yeah, sure. I have a following of maybe 3 people, but I'll come on. I'll talk about them.
You usually
get. Good stuff. Well, has the audio cut out? No.
All good. We're all good.
Oh, all good. Just I felt like everyone stopped talking. I was like, Wait, what's going on? The moment silence happens, it's the worst feeling in the world. As my heart plummets. Well, it's been awesome having you on the show, James. Thank you a lot. I really enjoyed listening to like your thoughts about gameplay, narrative, and just all the game stuff. It's been fun. If you want to watch this show, you've either been watching it live on Twitch, twitch.tv/ThoughtHogPodcast. Thank you so much for everybody. I've seen Lucy XX2000 in the chat, so thank you for putting something in there. You can also watch this video later on YouTube when it eventually gets uploaded, internet problems and computer problems permitting. I think I didn't get to upload last week's episode until today because of just things going wrong everywhere. You can also check this out on Anchor or other podcast services. Just pretty much wherever you listen to podcasts is probably there. Give us a like, a subscribe, a comment, really whatever you want. Share us with your friends. We're just having fun here, talking about video games. You can hear other bad takes, all of our predictions for the Game Awards. I really hope we get them all right. I feel like we might have got every single one of those predictions correct, Ollie. I'm feeling confident about it.
I think we might have got them all wrong.
I'm willing to. I'm not willing to put any money on it, but I think we could. We'll be back next week here on Twitch at around sometime in the evening on a Thursday. Between 7:30 and 8 we'll start. Depends again, technical problems, but we have fun here.
Keep you on your toes. Keep you on your toes.
Yeah, we keep everyone on our toes. So until then, it is going to be a goodbye from me.
Bye from me.
Bye from me.
Oh, all right. See you guys later. Bye, guys.
There we go.